it's not an empty, it's just a little thing.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to, but I'm just going to go to either Kurt or no SEO. No SEO.
I love it.
You do best for
Although in the league we can't back the race.
Why is it red?
You don't have to do that, but well, she did my birthday, but she didn't say after she was tired. I think before that, a couple weeks actually. We even planned one. I like her headphones on a statement. Yeah, I don't know why. So. Yeah, that's fine.
Wow.
So where do you guys want them to be? Because we can even use that little cup or something to unless you've got gaffer tape.
Yeah, I was just gonna have them right here this way.
Has anyone got tape?
What about you got? Am I there? Just like this. So I was just not looking directly at you.
Do you know what? There's there's only the two of you, so
Can you get in the middle as well?
Yeah?
If someone has a question. No, it's
No,
the
because
same.
they're doing distance.
Oh, okay.
I think
We don't want them looking directly down the barrel.
No, yeah, that's looking. Can you stand in the middle?
You also try to get them to gaze off into the distance.
okay.
Yeah, but maybe like
Rather than in between, or
Between us both, really. Between both.
Yeah?
yeah,
So if they
because I
look
can't
at
hear.
you
I
when
don't
they
want to
speak.
get their profile. I hear
Right,
what's
yeah.
happening,
So if they're facing us, only facing us.
Yeah.
Scary for anyone, really. But yeah,
that might be easy because if you're getting to gaze off from distance,
Bit
their eyes,
distracting, isn't it?
yeah, the eyes tend to wander, don't they?
they're coming down the street now.
Is that them?
Yeah.
Well spotted.
Yeah.
So this
Right,
is
do you want to
the
do the walk up now? They're coming anyway.
She's in about 4 messages.
Hello. Hi.
You could just look at our colleague.
Yeah,
here,
sorry
Sue,
about that.
that'd be great.
No worries.
Maybe during
Hello.
this period of time. I'm sorry about that.
Okay. Thank you everybody for being here. First of all, obviously I'm very, very happy. But I've prepared a few words. I want to share just a few points today. I want to start by thanking the people who have helped to get me here. I want to thank Katrina Rubens, my incredible solicitor of 4.5 years, who has worked tirelessly on this case. Nina Ross, my brilliant barrister who fought so fiercely for me in court. Denise Flynn, who has worked with Katrina since day one and always supported me. Anna Barr, who gave so much extra to this fight. Joe Whitehouse and Zainab Zaina, all of whom have individually contributed so much of their time to my fight. I do not know where I would be if not for Katrina believing in my case and committing to see this through. I want to thank Naintara Rana, the first true advocate I had 3 years into my fight, and Ruby Rotenberg for stepping up when I lost my advocate and who has become a brilliant one in her own right. I want to thank the LGBTQI service Gallup, who took on my case last minute to support me during trial. Both Whit and Faye have been amazing, empathetic advocates. And Black Women's Service Sister Space, especially Ngozi, Rose and Jan, who were instrumental in sharing my story and creating such affirming community support for me during the trial. And thank you to everybody who came and sat to hear me in the trial and hear my story. Every member of the public, thank you. I would like to thank the witnesses who came forward to give evidence on the record of their own experiences of Mike, including witness Bibi, who has been anonymized, who is an ex-client of Mike, who bravely shared her own story of his abuse of her. Thank you, Bibi. In 2021, I had to fundraise to be able to keep this case going. Thank you to every single person who donated to my fundraiser. You kept this case alive. As I said, if successful, I will forward that money to other victims. And lastly, my dad, rest in peace, who I lost last year, from whom I inherited my stubbornness to continue this fight. And my auntie and namesake, Kumba Jane, who has prayed for me every single day, and as she says, I am not the first and I will not be the last, so hold my head high. There are others who I am unable to name in this short time that I will continue to thank privately. Friends, family, chosen family, service providers and compassionate people along the way. I will first share my thoughts on the verdict. Thank fucking God. 8 years. I prepared this statement before receiving the verdict. There are so many things I would like to say, but in this short time, I want to speak mostly to other victims. So often in this journey, I was struck by just how many people it has taken to hold one man accountable for his violence. Each person I thanked in this statement can tally their hours, their pay, and the ways this case has affected their own lives. For me, I have been fighting for almost 8 years. Mike Luzada raped me a month before my 30th birthday. I now stand here on the eve of my 38th birthday. This man has robbed me of years of my life. To do this has been a full-time job on top of surviving and living in the world with the trauma I have been left with. I have fought against the inaction of the police, the CPS, and now a 4.5-year civil rape case and trial. And it has cost me so much. A life I would have lived otherwise. My health, relationships. I should not have had to do this. If I live to be 80, holding this man accountable, stopping him from harming anybody else, has so far cost me 1/10 of my life. How do you quantify that in monetary amounts? After Luzada raped me, I lost everything I knew myself to be. I was drowning. I was suicidal and self-medicated on alcohol and drugs for a very long time. In 2018, I lost a pregnancy, to name just a few things that have marked this journey. This fight has asked me to sacrifice in every part of my life. Friends and family who could not sit with my need to speak out. I even managed the demands of the case while being the sole carer for my dying father. All of this is time that I will never get back. How do you quantify that in monetary amounts? Like many people, the police were not my first call. But once the investigation was opened, I fought with everything in me to bring Mike Luzada to justice and stop him from harming anyone else. As a result of my treatment by the police and the prosecution service, I was left feeling betrayed and totally and completely worthless. When I started this journey, I was desperate to learn from someone who had done this. For many reasons, victims so rarely put their face to rape, and that is because it is us who ends up on trial, in our communities and in the courts. I so needed to hear the stories of black women who had traveled this journey and fought this fight. And they are here, but have been obscured and erased by the intersections they find themselves at. As communities, we don't just face the barrier of institutional and cultural sexism, but racism, colorism, classism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, ableism, horophobia, Islamophobia, the list is not exhaustive, and which apparently render our stories irrelevant and inconvenient. Instead, I had to find the codes to reclaim and insist on my own self-respect and self-worth. That I am something worth fighting for. That I am inherently valuable. And I found this in the stories of Toni Morrison, Fatou Jallow, Queen Nanny, Sarah Bartman, Miss Major, Marsha P. Johnson, Angela Davis, June Jordan, and Tituba, to name just a few. Although I am happy to have beat the odds, I am not here to share a Cinderella story about justice. I stand here for every victim who was turned away from the first person they told, the police, the CPS, their caregivers, or their loved ones. Instead, I want to tell you, victims, survivors, that in going to the end of this journey and never giving up, I have found a self-belief that has kept me alive and not just existing, but able to reckon with the ugliest truth. I only want to urge you to commit unapologetically to the ends of your own needs, no matter what anyone tells you. Whatever that accountability and reparation looks like, judicial or otherwise. We live in a culture of silence. In speaking out, I hope that others will know that they have a right to as well. I do this for everybody that comes after me, and I do this for young people. I want them to grow up without shame hung around their necks, to know a pride for speaking out. In making my story public, I challenge the constrictions of the perfect victim that keep us silent and deny justice when we do speak out. I wanted you to see my face, to see yourself in me. In my story, I am not the perfect victim, but I am a survivor of child abuse, rape, and domestic violence, and I will not be shamed by anybody for the actions of others. I reject this stigma and this shame. It's killing us, and they use it to kill us. All of this I know now, but I should not have had to do this. The system is completely inadequate to deal with rape. I should not have had to do the work of keeping women safe from Mike Luzada. How do you quantify that in monetary amounts? Now to Mike. For 8 years, I have been gagged from speaking out. In 8 years, you have shown no true remorse or reflection for what you have done to me, the ways you completely derailed and changed the course of my life. For 8 years I have been subjected to your lies, of which you repeated in court. I was forced to sit through your pornified version of me, of my rape. Your claim I was not experiencing a panic attack, but sexually active. That I was not incapacitated, but an eager participant. You painted me as the one pressuring you, an exotified Jezebel, denied my vulnerability and even threatened me openly in the courtroom. Mike, pay your dues. Face your actions. I cannot afford to have any more time stolen from me. This is my world too, and I deserve to live in it. I did not ask to become your moral teacher. This was thrust upon me, first by your violence, then the inaction of the police and CPS to hold you to account. All institutions that claim to uphold justice. You now have 2 victims on the record. You are lucky that the accountability you face is financial. But how do you quantify that in monetary amounts? I would like to share one last thing with anyone who has experienced sexual violence. This violence is born of patriarchy, and it touches all genders, all ages, sexualities and cultures. And I want to speak about shame. I could not have done this without having to confront my own shame. And I have found on this journey a particular understanding of it. I have realized that each of us believes our own shame to be singularly shameful. That nobody could truly accept or love that part of us if they were to know the particulars of ours. Sure, we can extend compassion, understanding and outrage to other people's stories, but we believe it is ours which is uniquely ugly. But that is the very nature of it. That is the lie of shame. And it's only by stepping outside of that prison, saying this is the feature of shame and I will speak out regardless, that we can begin to dismantle the stranglehold it has on us and our culture. This shame is not ours. I refuse to accept it anymore, and I refuse any more of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ella. My name's Katrina, I'm Ella's solicitor, and I've worked with Ella for 4.5 years through this incredible fight. But this story started 8 years ago. Well, before that, it started when Ella was sexually abused and groomed as a child. Ella fought for years to overcome psychological, emotional effects of this sexual abuse. But one of the impacts of it was that she suffered panic attacks during consensual activities with partners. This had a huge and resounding impact on Ella's life. And it was for this specific reason that she sought out the services of Mike Lusada, a renowned sex therapist whose website proclaimed that he had set up the institution, the professional body, to help regulate this industry and bring codes of ethics to it. Understandably, Ella trusted what she saw. She'd heard about Mike Lusada, she'd seen in the Metro newspaper that he wanted to bring his services to the NHS, that he worked with sexual abuse victims and victims of trauma. Ella booked a session with him specifically to help address the panic attacks she experienced during consensual sex as a result of her child's sexual abuse, and that cannot be forgotten. She explained this to him in earlier sessions with him, in a telephone call with him, and then when she saw him in person on the 18th of August 2016. I'm really pleased today that in his judgment the judge has found that there was no doubt that Mike Lusada was aware of Ella's history and the reason why she had booked a therapy session with him. What should have happened is that Ella should have received therapeutic trauma-informed care at that session. Instead, Mike Lusada instructed Ella to embody and speak as her child self who had been sexually abused, and the judge has upheld that happened today. The judge has found that Ella's account of this session was truthful, and that the report she gave to the police as well was also truthful. What happened next after Mike Lusada had instructed Ella to embody and speak as her child self was that he started to touch her. This understandably caused Ella to start suffering the very symptoms for which she was seeing Mike Lusada: panic, disassociation, a feeling of heaviness in her body, her fists starting to clench, a feeling like she couldn't communicate properly, a feeling like she couldn't move. The judge has found that these were objective signs that would have been obvious to Mr. Lusada, but he chose to ignore those. By this point, the judge has upheld that Ella lacked capacity to give any form of valid consent to what happened next in the session. And we can't forget what happened next. Mike Lusada went on to spit on his fingers using his own saliva and digitally penetrate and masturbate Ella. He then, after having done this and continuing to speak to Ella, Ella continuing to suffer panic symptoms, dissociation, he suggested to her that they should use his penis energetically and that the head of the penis could act like a laser beam to absorb her trauma. It's important to remember that he was purporting to provide her trauma-informed treatment by using these types of sexual acts upon her. By this point, Ella was in no position to provide any informed consent, and crucially, the judge has also found there was no discussion with Ella about this. He didn't ask, she didn't say yes. She wasn't in a position to do so. This judgment is a resounding victory for Ella on all grounds. As I've said, Mr. Justice Baker fully accepted Ella's account. He's awarded Ella over £200,000 in damages, with more to be assessed for the complex post-traumatic stress disorder, the re-traumatisation Ella has suffered, the impact this has had on her life, including loss of earnings, including the impact on her relationship, the fact this has taken 8 years and has been the path Ella has had to walk. I'm also pleased that the judge has recognised that this constituted an abuse of trust by Mr. Lusada, and when awarding damages, he noted that Mr. Lusada had sought to blame Ella to hold her responsible for what had happened. The judge entirely rejected Mr. Lusada's account of what happened on the 18th of August 2016, which, as Ella has said, included portraying her as an active victim in her own rape. The judges found that didn't happen, that Ella didn't put her legs over his, that his account of Ella being sexually engaged or having sexual energy during this was not the true account of what happened. Ella has done an incredible job by waiving her anonymity and by standing up in court, and the judge recognised that because she's had to give her account again and again, she should be compensated properly and seriously in damages. Obviously, while no amount of money can ever change what happened to Ella, going through this process has allowed her to speak her truth and speak out on behalf of all other victims and survivors of sexual violence. Many people have asked why this was a civil claim and why it took so long to get to court. It was a civil claim because the police and the Crown Prosecution Service decided not to prosecute Ella's case. Instead, it has been Ella who has been the driving force in gathering evidence, in having to disclose her medical records and having to undergo psychiatric assessments, her legal team having to interview other potential witnesses and help her. It should not be the job of one person to do the role that the system, the police, the CPS should be fulfilling to help protect women and protect people like Ella and see justice through. So we have to think about what happens next. And obviously, a lot of that is up to Ella. But what I hope this also shows is that the therapy industry, where therapists currently are not required to be regulated by any professional body, it's not a protected title. Counsellor is not a protected title in the UK. There was no regulatory option for Ella. We couldn't take her case to a regulator and say there was a massive breach of ethics here. Investigate, publish something. Instead, her only option was to go through the civil court system. So, as we might have a new government coming in and hopefully reform might be on the horizon, I'd hope that our systems that are supposed to protect us, whether that's criminal or the regulatory systems, can take a long, hard look at themselves, and that we can bring in reform for other victims and survivors and other clients of therapists who wield a huge amount of power over their clients in the future. Anything else? We do some questions. Do we have any questions?
What is next?
Oh, that's a big question. Yeah. Well, I'll have a good night's sleep, I think, and we have to get back to you. But just trying to take it in. I mean, it's been 8 years, and people keep asking me, how do you feel? And it's like, well, how can I speak to 8 years? You know, it would probably take 8 years.
Is there any suggestion £217,000 is a record amount?
Sorry,
£217,000 would be more than
so we don't know what the final sum will be because the judge has asked us to go and do some further calculations because he's made an award for Ella for loss of earnings and for pension contribution loss, which is probably not the most exciting part of Ella's case. But the amount that Ella received for psychiatric injuries and injuries to feelings was definitely a high amount. I don't know of another case where a therapist has abused power and, like in Ella's, and been ordered to pay damages of this nature. What I would say is that the level of the award definitely reflects the severity of what happened to Ella and the losses that she has suffered, which have been absolutely immense.
Okay, everyone's done. We're going to move over. I believe BBC London, you want to take
That's okay.
Ella and Kat over the road.
I'll walk over here just to get away from the
Want us to mill around here?
Are you happy to follow?
Or is Ken, well, either or.
If you're happy to come over, I think it might be easier actually.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for them to let me know if I gotta go down, but I might need you to carry the suitcase.
Thank you.